If you are searching for a path you can trust, listen to the one who answered with a person, not a philosophy. Discover the path with Jesus. Unfold his journey on the road to truth. He did not offer a map of ideas alone. He walked among people, spoke with authority, and said plainly, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." That declaration is the hinge of everything that follows. It pulls together longing and revelation, hunger and homecoming. It is both compass and companion. My soul longs for God. The image that opens our journey is simple and human: thirst. We know what it is to search for meaning, for a direction that holds when the road is muddy, when the horizon dissolves into fog, when the bright promises of the world prove hollow. Like a deer panting for water, wisdom tells us to seek the stream that never runs dry. This is where our road begins, with longing that is honest and raw, a psalmic ache that names the need we often disguise. The first steps of the way are not glorious. They are an invitation at the edges of a day. John the Baptist points, and men and women follow. Among them are fishermen cleaning nets, a tax collector balancing coins, a group of simple friends who will later be called apostles. "Come and see," one of the earliest witnesses says. The invitation is quiet, almost experimental, an open door rather than a demand. To come and see is to risk curiosity, to exchange certainty for a waiting posture. It is the posture of all who will follow, a willingness to step beyond what we already know. There is a moment that captures this beginning. Two brothers stand at the water. They are not yet leaders, only people whose lives will be interrupted by an invitation. One of them follows Jesus at once, then turns to bring his brother. "We have found the Messiah," he says. The language is urgent but not slick. It is the language of discovery, an identification of a presence that changes how one sees the world. For some, the first response is immediate trust. For others, slow recognition. Either way, this calling, simple, personal, persistent, models the way Jesus invites us to follow. Psalm Interlude. My heart remembers the dry places and cries for living water. When the path narrows and shadows press close, I lift my eyes and name the one who moves toward the thirsty. Give me courage to follow when the invitation feels like a risk, and steady my feet upon a way that will not disappoint. We do not follow a doctrine from a distance. We follow a person who walks through villages, climbs hills, and speaks to crowds. To discover the path with Jesus is to watch how he defines the road by the life he lives and the words he gives. He does not begin with complex theologies or abstract systems. He begins with the character of the kingdom, laid out in teachings that function like milestones. Blessed are, a counterintuitive map that reorients desires. On a hillside one morning, people gather from towns and fields. The air is sharp with expectation. He looks at them and names those who belong to the road, the poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, the persecuted for righteousness' sake. Each phrase is a redefinition. Where the world measures success by influence and comfort, he measures it by humility, by mercy, by a heart that will not be hard. The Beatitudes are not a list of rewards to be earned. They form a portrait of the person who walks the way, one whose life is shaped by God's priorities. There is simple, practical application woven into these declarations. When Jesus praises meekness, he is not advocating passivity. He is naming power under control, people who refuse to meet harm with returned harm because they trust a deeper justice. When he blesses the merciful, he calls us to compassion that cost us something. These are not optional virtues. They are the coordinates of the road. If you want to walk toward truth, you start by rearranging what you value. He uses everyday images to make the path tangible. You are the salt of the earth, he tells those listening, and then, you are the light of the world. The metaphors are as immediate as a kitchen table and as ordinary as a lamp on a stand. Salt seasons and preserves, light makes a room usable, turns danger into safety, exposes what was hidden. Belonging to his way is never private. It has communal, public consequence. A disciple is someone whose life changes the flavor of the world, and whose presence exposes the way forward in darkness. Practical takeaway. If you follow him, expect your life to push against degradation and illuminate truth in places where people stumble. He teaches on prayer with the same posture of reorientation. When his followers ask him to teach them to pray, he gives a pattern more than a formula. The Lord's Prayer is not a magical incantation, but a posture, dependence, priority, daily provision, forgiveness, and protection. The emphasis is on orientation, where we turn our hearts when need and temptation press in. Prayer is the road's rhythm. It keeps the traveler attentive to the Father. Practical takeaway. Let prayer set the agenda for your day, not the urgent crises that shout the loudest. One of the striking features of his teaching is how it makes ordinary actions sacred. He speaks about anger and reconciliation in the same breath, telling his followers that righteousness includes how they resolve disputes, how they honor relationships. He speaks about adultery not only as an act, but as a matter of the heart, reorienting the map away from mere behavior to inner transformation. The way he speaks is demanding because truth itself demands a reordering of allegiance. Yet it is also merciful, offering a path not of despair, but of renewed capacity for love. Mini-hook. What will you do with such words? Will they be information you admire from a distance, or will they become implements you use to shape your life? Psalm interlude. Hear my cry, O God. When the world's wisdom tempts me to trade compassion for convenience, grant me contrition. When pride invites me to harden, teach me gentleness. Let your law be written not as a burden, but as life breathed into my bones. The sermon does not end in theory. Jesus calls for a posture toward wealth, toward oaths, toward enemies, toward fasting, almsgiving, and judgment. He refuses shortcuts. Righteousness must be authentic, not performative. He warns about laying up treasures where moth and rust destroy, because the road cares about the heart. He instructs about anxiety, saying the bird does not toil anxiously while the Creator feeds it. If God cares for birds and flowers, how much more will he care for those created in his image? Here, his tone moves from proverb to promise. Seek first the kingdom and its righteousness, he says, and life's necessities will be given in their time. That promise does not convert into a simple cause-effect checklist. It promises a reordering of priorities, not an automatic guarantee of material ease. The road honors trust, not transactional bargaining. Practical takeaway. Trust shapes priorities. Priorities shape life. At the close of the teaching, he invites a posture toward others that refuses to return evil for evil. He commands radical generosity. Turn the other cheek, give your cloak as well as your coat, go the extra mile. These are not merely social niceties. They are devices that dismantle cycles of violence and revenge. Walking his path means choosing a disruptive kindness that interrupts enmity. In the middle of all these teachings, Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, and others are learning not from lectures, but from the life around them. They watch him heal, they see him confront hypocrisy, and most of all, they see him practice what he teaches. Discipleship is apprenticeship. You learn the way by watching the waywalker, then by doing with him until you do when he is not there. There is a moment that illustrates the essential posture of the road. A young man asks about inheritance, about how to inherit eternal life. Jesus responds with a story and a demand that pushes at the soft places of the heart. Love for possessions can become a rival god. The path asks for renunciation, not as punishment but as liberation. To follow is to reorient your attachments so that they serve the true treasure. Psalm Interlude. When my grip tightens around what comforts me, remind me that you are my portion and my good. Teach me to surrender the lesser for the greater. Make my heart restless until it rests in you. After the teaching on the mountain, the days are filled with movement, crowds, village roads, boats crossing seas. The narrative shifts from instruction to demonstration. Jesus does not simply explain the kingdom, he reveals it in deeds that cut through ordinary explanations. The miracles are not magic tricks for applause. They are signs, pointer words etched in the fabric of life, saying something true about the one who does them. But before we follow him into signs, there is another set of stories, parables, that take plain domestic scenes and lift them into ethical crucibles. Parables are not simple morals. They are invitations to change how we see reality. In the story of the Good Samaritan, a traveler is stripped and left for dead. A priest and a Levite pass by, constrained by religious calculation. Then a Samaritan, culturally despised, comes and binds wounds, carries the man to safety, pays for care, and promises to return. The story slams the categories humans build and forces the question, who is neighbor? The road requires that we expand our moral imagination to include those we would prefer to avoid. Practical takeaway. Walking with Jesus means being willing to cross social lines to show mercy. Another parable turns homecoming into theology. A son takes his portion, squanders it, and finds himself in the pig pen. He decides to return, rehearsing words of apology and servanthood, but his father sees him from a distance, runs, embraces, and celebrates. The elder son protests. The father insists on celebration and restoration. The point is not naive forgiveness, but a picture of grace that reverses expectations. The way includes a welcome that transforms shame into belonging. Practical takeaway. The pathway back from brokenness is met by unexpected grace. The road is open to those who return. These stories unsettle. They require a heart posture that is both humble and willing to act. They prepare the disciples for the kinds of encounters they will have. Neighbors to love, lost people to restore, systems to challenge. Parables compress the way into images that lodge in memory. Mini-hook. So what does this story require from us today? Will we be the neighbor who stops, the son who returns, the peacemaker who risks reputation for reconciliation? Psalm Interlude. Restore my soul, O God. When doubt clouds my judgment and the easy path appears bright, remind me that your way bends toward mercy and saves the lost. Keep my feet from straying into the shortcuts of cruelty or indifference. There is also another dynamic in his speech, watchfulness. He tells parables about servants waiting for their master's return, about bridesmaids prepared with lamps, about tenants entrusted with responsibility. The road is not passive. It expects readiness and faithful stewardship. The kingdom's arrival is sure, but the timing is not ours to set. Therefore, watchfulness is not frantic anxiety, but sober attentiveness. Practical takeaway. Keep watch by practicing faithfulness in the small tasks. Readiness is formed in ordinary obedience. Between teachings and parables, the narrative gives room to human responses. Some are moved to belief, others hardened to hostility. The religious leaders, teachers of the law, Pharisees, often respond with skepticism, critique, and at times plotting. Their concerns are sometimes about piety, sometimes about power and reputation. Jesus does not shy away from calling out hypocrisy, but he also warns his followers about becoming like those they oppose. The road refuses duplicity. True adherence looks like consistency between speech and life. At times, the disciples misunderstand. They argue about greatness. Jesus rebukes and reorients. The greatest are servants. He takes a child, places the child among them, and says that a welcome for the smallest is a welcome for him. Humility sinks into the center of discipleship. The road is not a ladder to prestige, but a posture of receiving and giving life. As the sun dips low on certain days, crowds gather for stories that revolve around everyday objects, seeds, lamps, lilies. Each parable functions as a test. Will you see the kingdom in this ordinary thing, or will you reduce it to the ordinary alone? For those with ears to hear, the stories illuminate. For those who refuse to see, they remain puzzles. We sense an urgency in these teachings. The language shifts from general invitation to pressing call. He speaks of fields ripe for harvest, of laborers needed, of the cost of discipleship. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. The phrase is stark. To deny oneself is to unshackle from the claim that our lives must be directed by self-interest alone. To take up the cross is to accept that following sometimes leads to suffering, not as a badge of honor, but as a consequence of living in a world opposed to the way. Yet the promise within the demand is that the path leads to life. The cost is not ultimate loss, but the route through which life is found. Practical takeaway: expect resistance, expect cost, expect that surrender opens the way to true life. Before the narrative moves towards signs that confirm his authority, the healings, the calming of storms, the multiplication of bread, pause on the posture that the sermon and parables create. The way defined by teaching and illustrated by stories forms a character, humble, merciful, watchful, sacrificial, prayerful. It trains the eye to see neighbors as sisters and brothers, enemies as misled, the world as a field needing workers. Psalm Interlude. My heart trembles at the cost you call me to, but I will not turn back. Let me learn steadfastness. Teach me to carry the burden of love when it feels too heavy, to bend the knee when pride wants to stand tall. Make my faith brave and my mercy costly. Finally, as the day yields to movement and demonstration, the road bends towards signs that awaken belief. He walks beside the sea, steps into a boat, and a storm swallows the sky. The men who have followed him for months see their panic filled with something else entirely, a teacher who commands wind and water. The lake answers. The amazement is twofold. Nature obeys, and the presence of one who calms reveals the cosmic dimension of his mission. The miracle is not an exhibition of showmanship. It is a sign that the kingdom has authority, even where chaos seems to reign. But the signs always point back to a person. When someone blind receives sight, it is a revelation of God's work to reverse the dark places of the soul. When bread multiplies, it is a peek into God's provision, a foreshadowing of the feast that will reconcile hunger and abundance. Each act invites a choice, to see the sign as an end in itself, or to see it as pointing to one who is the way. Mini-hook. The sign points to a person. Will you look at him? This is where our first part of the road must pause, not because the journey is complete, but because understanding the way requires more than a list of events. We have been shown how Jesus defines the road, how he draws followers by inviting curiosity rather than imposing compulsion, how he trains them by teaching and storytelling, and how he sharpens their character by illustrating mercy, humility, and watchful readiness. We see the edges of the path forming, a person to follow, a character to become, a posture of prayer and surrender to inhabit. Psalm Interlude. My hope is in you, O Lord. Make my steps steady when the path narrows. Keep me from settling for lesser comforts when you offer true life. Let my heart be a lamp that keeps watch, my hands ready to serve, my lips quick to forgive. We stand now at a turning point. The next stretches of the road will move from definition into confirmation. Miracles that unlock harder hearts, encounters that reveal identity, and conversations that force a choice. There will be dialogues in the night, confrontations in the temple, encounters with those on the margins, and the steady tension between the curtain of religious certainty and the openness of the kingdom. If this invitation touches you, if you want to keep walking and discover how the path proves itself through signs, confrontations, and ultimately resurrection, then come with curiosity and courage. But for now, carry the posture the road demands, a heart tuned to mercy, hands ready to serve, feet prepared to follow even when the way asks for surrender. The journey ahead will ask more of us, and it will give more than we can imagine. The road bends and narrows. The teaching and the stories have shaped the heart. Now the way is confirmed in acts that press against the ordinary and expose the presence of God in flesh. We follow him from the shore into storms, from marketplaces to households where grief sits heavy, from dusty paths where the blind cry for mercy. These are the moments when belief faces a test. Will we look beyond the spectacle to the person who is revealed? One evening, the light slants low and the wind kicks up over Galilee. Jesus steps into a boat and falls asleep. A storm arrives like an accusation, waves climbing over the rim, fear sharpening in the faces of the men who have learned to read weather by wind and sun. Panic is practical, instinct is to steer and fight. They wake him with questions thin with dread. He stands, commands the wind and the water, and a hush settles so complete the lake seems to hold its breath. The disciples stare, not simply at a calmed surface, but at one whose word bends chaos. What he does to the storm speaks to more than meteorology. It announces authority over the disorder that plagues human life. If the sea answers him, perhaps the loneliness, the fever, the grief we carry is not beyond his jurisdiction. Psalm Interlude. O God, when the seas of my life roar with fear, still my heart. Teach me to trust the voice that speaks peace into the tempest. Let fear give way to a faith that knows you hold the deep. The miracle of the storm leads to another kind of unveiling, the healed body that becomes testimony. In a town dusted with the residue of daily struggle, a man blind from birth sits at the roadside. He has known darkness and the sting of being cast aside. Jesus kneels, makes mud with spit and earth, and lays it upon the blind eyes. The neighbors watch, outraged or curious. The man goes to wash and returns seeing a world that had been rumor and shadow. Hearing the account, the religious authorities interrogate, uncomfortable that a man's life has been changed in a way that unsettles their categories. They probe history, lineage, and law. The man, simple, honest, speaks from experience. I was once blind, and now I see. This is the kind of miracle that forces a verdict. Sign after sign narrows the field of explanation until it becomes unbearable to pretend the work is merely natural. The healed man points away from method to the one who acted. Miracles function as pointers, not the goal in themselves, but as arrows aimed at a person. The invitation is always, look, and then decide what you will do with the one who gives sight. Practical takeaway. Let signs move you toward the source, not toward spectacle. The road is not an attraction. It is a calling. There are scenes that pierce the quiet with radical provision. On a hillside, the crowd swells until hunger nudges panic. Bread and fish are a few small things, 5 loaves, 2 fish, a boy's lunch, and yet he prays, breaks, and distributes. The baskets left over remind the watchers that provision on his way is more than meeting need. It is a foretaste of the abundance that belongs to the kingdom. People taste care on their tongues. They taste the shepherd's generosity. The crowd for a moment sees that the way is not merely about moral instruction, but about God's tenderness toward flesh. Psalm Interlude. From your table, O Lord, feed my hunger for righteousness. When the world offers crumbs that claim to be banquet, remind me of your abundance that satisfies. Word of these deeds spreads. Some come to believe, others sour into suspicion. The religious leaders grow cautious and then hostile. In marketplaces and synagogues, questions are posed not to learn, but to trap. They measure Jesus against traditions and expectations, and when he refuses to be domesticated, they recoil. He names their heart posture and exposes where religion has become an idol of external piety and social respectability. Yet his corrections are not merely polemical. He longs for restoration. When he confronts hypocrisy, he does so to call people back to a faith that bears the fruit of justice and mercy. Amid these public confrontations, there are private conversations that reveal the road's true demand. One night, under the cover of darkness, a man of influence comes seeking answers. He knows the scriptures. He has authority. He has also a hunger that his position cannot satisfy. To him, Jesus speaks of a new birth, not a shameful moral makeover, but a radical reorientation, like being born again into a new order of creation. Nicodemus hears words that unsettle his sense of control. The Spirit moves where it wills. Being part of the way involves trust in an action that begins within, unseen, yet transforms how one lives in the world. The road calls Nicodemus out of comfortable observation and into the possibility of new life that belongs to God's children. Practical takeaway: discipleship is an inward work by the Spirit, as much as it is outward obedience. The road reforms the heart. There are encounters at the margins that reveal the scandalous inclusivity of the way. At a noon-baked well, a woman from Samaria draws water. She is not neutral in the social landscape. Her life is marked by fractured relationships and suspicion. He asks her for a drink, breaking custom, and a conversation opens that moves from water to worship to true identity. He speaks of living water that quenches thirst forever. The woman, initially defensive and curious, finds herself holding a cup of revelation. The Christ speaks to her, need not with judgment, but with invitation. Her testimony becomes a bridge. She runs back to town and draws others to the well. In that exchange, the road refuses fences of ethnicity and reputation. It reaches into places of stigma and offers dignity. Psalm Interlude. Because you meet me at my well, O Lord, let my life become a spring of living water. Teach me to offer refreshment rather than reproach, to bring others to the source that sustains. As miracles and personal conversations accumulate, the cost of the way grows clearer. The intensity of opposition rises. The Pharisees sharpen questions into accusations. Plots thicken. The men who have followed him, Peter, Andrew, James, John, Thomas, Philip, Nathanael, watch their teacher, and sometimes they misunderstand. They argue over precedents, wonder whether the kingdom will be restored in the way their expectations imagine. He rebukes gently, then sternly, recalibrating their hopes. The kingdom's power often looks like weakness to the world. He insists that greatness is measured in service, that leadership is a washing of feet, that power is surrendered rather than seized. There is a starkness in his words about the path. The invitation is open, but it will not spare his followers from resistance. When he says, "I and the Father are one," he brings his identity into the light. When he declares the way demands the cross, he allows the cost to be known. These claims polarize. Some follow all the more, others step away. Loyal companionship becomes the proving ground for faith. The depth of discipleship is revealed in the face of pressure. Practical takeaway: be prepared that following the way may estrange you from some comforts and call you into courage. One of the most intimate disruptions to the path is betrayal from within the circle of influence. The narrative moves with a somber inevitability toward the hour when allegiances harden and fear finds a new shape. A kiss in an olive grove, a flicker of lantern light, the clashing of swords. These are the small human details that usher in the most cosmic acts. Arrest, trial, and silence follow. The crowds that days before had shouted for healing now murmur accusations. The disciples scatter. The road, which has asked for sacrifice all along, now demands a surrender that looks like death. Psalm interlude, lament. My God, why have you forsaken me? When the night around me is thick with fear and friends have fled, hold me, bend down and breathe life into what seems dead. Teach me that hope can be rooted even in the valley of shadow. The crucifixion unfolds with an awful clarity. An innocent man carried to a place called Golgotha. Nails that fix him to wood. A crown that mocks but also points to an inverted kingdom. He breathes forgiveness over those who do the harm. The cross is not an accident. It is the heart of the way, love given even when love is rejected. In that act, the claim that he is the path to the Father reaches its most dramatic expression. If he is indeed the way, it must pass through suffering. The cross turns what the world calls defeat into the hinge of redemption. For those who stand nearby, the cross is either scandal or revelation. Mary Magdalene, among the faithful few, holds sorrow and hope together as she watches the curtain of the temple be torn from top to bottom, a sign that the access to God has been opened in a new way. The disciples hide, stunned, hearts fractured by grief and the failure they feel. The road, it seems, has reached its darkest point. Yet the story refuses to be contained by the tomb. On the third day, before dawn, women go to the grave weighed down by grief and ritual. The stone is rolled away. The body is not there. An angelic word breaks the quiet. He is not here. He has risen. Mary arrives, grieving still, until she hears her name. When the voice calls, something in her belief uncoils. She turns, sees him, and, in a mixture of awe and clinging, reaches toward the risen Lord. His words are not merely a greeting, but a mission. Be the witness. He commissions her to carry the news that the way has led through death into life. The empty tomb changes everything. It is the decisive event that confirms his identity and validates the path he called others to follow. Without resurrection, the road would be tragic. With it, the road is triumphant, not triumphant in worldly terms, but in the deep sense that death does not have the last word. The resurrection is the vindication that the promises embedded in his teaching, the authority in his signs, and the compassion in his mercy were not illusions, but signs of a new creation breaking in. Psalm interlude. Praise. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. When the stone is rolled away, my heart leans into praise. You have turned mourning into dancing, O God. Let my life witness to this surprise of grace. Not every follower witnesses the empty tomb the same way. Thomas, who was absent when Mary first ran with the news, wrestles with doubt. He states a demand that sounds blunt. He will not believe unless he sees and touches. Days later, the risen Lord appears in the room where the disciples are gathered, and he addresses Thomas directly. He invites not to entrap, but to move Thomas from doubt to confession. When Thomas touches, he is undone. He falls to his knees and declares with words that will echo through centuries, "My Lord and my God." That confession is the climax of the road's proof. The path leads not merely to moral teaching or charismatic display, but to an encounter with Jesus in his risen lordship. This moment is tender and pastoral. It honors honest seeking and moves it toward faith. It does not belittle doubt. It brings doubt into a safe encounter with truth. The road welcomes seekers with open hands and invites their questions to find answers in the person of Christ. The risen Lord gives more than assurance. He breathes on his disciples and says, "Receive the Holy Spirit." That breath is not merely symbolic, it is the impartation of presence. The Spirit, promised earlier as advocate, is now given as companion, teacher, and power for mission. The way continues beyond the earthly ministry. It becomes communal life empowered from within. The Spirit knits the scattered followers into a community that carries the way into the world. Practical takeaway: the path does not leave us alone. The presence of the Spirit equips and sustains us for obedience. He commissions them with a simple, wrenching mandate. As the Father sent him, he sends them. The road is inherently missional. To follow is to be sent. The mission is not to conquer with force, but to bear witness, heal, forgive, and offer reconciliation. The Great Commission is not a suggestion for the particularly zealous. It defines the identity of every follower, people who are both disciples and witnesses, formed by the way and sent to testify to it. There is an urgency to this sending. He uses images of fields ready for harvest, of workers needed. The task is not merely to preserve faith as private possession, but to embody it publicly, through obedience, mercy, and prayer. This means practicing the habits that the road trains. Regular prayer shaped by dependence rather than demand, community that practices forgiveness rather than performance, service that seeks the neighbor rather than the applause of the crowd. Psalm Interlude. Send me, O Lord, into the fields you prepare. Give me hands willing to serve, a mouth ready to speak your truth in love, and a heart that bears both courage and compassion. Keep me faithful when the days are long. What does walking this road look like day by day? It is not an exotic itinerary. It is waking with a posture of prayer, responding to need, choosing mercy where revenge tempts, refusing the fast lane of reputation, and instead taking the narrow route of humility. It is setting the Lord's pattern of prayer at the center of life and letting forgiveness set the rhythm of community. It is the small fidelity of returning phone calls to the lonely, stepping into reconciliation with a brother or sister, giving when it costs, and offering a listening presence that the world mistakes for weakness, but the kingdom knows as strength. Practical markers of the path include daily prayer that orients rather than reacts, acts of mercy that cross social lines, readiness shaped by faithful work in small tasks, and a life formed by community where confession and encouragement are ordinary. The Spirit equips such life not as a magic power to avoid hardship, but as the companion who empowers love in the face of resistance. One of the deepest marks of the way is the willingness to carry sorrow and hope together. The cross and resurrection are not mere historical points to recite. They become a lens through which suffering is held. We will grieve losses and still hope, because death has been visited and overturned by the God who raises. This hope does not erase pain. It reorients it so that suffering participates in a larger story of redemption. Psalm Interlude, Petition and Praise. In my weakness, be my strength. When sorrow writes its script across my days, remind me that your power is perfected in frailty. Fill me with a hope that sings even through the night, and make my life a hymn to your faithfulness. As we think about concrete next steps, consider these practices that anchor a pilgrim on the road. First, cultivate a life of steady prayer, brief, honest conversations with the Father that shape priorities and calm anxieties. Second, commit to community. Find a band of people who will practice mercy with you, who will call you to humility, and with whom you can serve. Third, enter the Scriptures with both curiosity and reverence. Let the teachings of the way shape decisions, not just inspire sentiments. Fourth, look for neighbors to love. Mercy is the test of the way's integrity. Fifth, expect that following will sometimes cost you comfort. Let cost refine rather than embitter your soul. Finally, rely on the Spirit. Ask for the Advocate's guidance, for boldness to witness, for gentleness to love. Application is not an abstract moralism, but an invitation to embody truth. The road to truth is walked by people who love like Jesus, who forgive like Jesus, who are sent like Jesus. The journey is communal. It is formed in the daily fidelity of ordinary tasks. If you find yourself hesitant, if questions crowd in like storm clouds, remember Thomas and Nicodemus. Honest doubt is not disqualifying. It is an opening for encounter. Bring your questions to the one who breathed on his frightened followers and gave them life. He meets seekers, not with condemnation, but with a presence that converts curiosity into confession. Psalm interlude. Teach me, O Lord, to bring my doubts like lamps into your light. Let my search not be a reason for hiding, but an invitation to your presence. Make me brave to ask and humble to listen. As the narrative closes on our walk this far, keep the primary claims in view. Jesus is the way to the Father, and his identity is not a mere proposition, but a person, one who walked, taught, served, suffered, rose, and breathed the Spirit into his people. He calls us to follow, to take up the posture he embodied: mercy, humility, watchfulness, sacrificial love, prayerful dependence. The kingdom he inaugurated is not primarily about wealth or health in worldly terms. It's about restoration, reconciliation, and new life that begins now and stretches into eternity. So what does the road ask of you today? It asks a decisive turn, from passivity to following, from theory to apprenticeship, from fear to obedience. If your soul knows the deer's thirst, bring that hunger to him. If your hands are stained by life's compromises, come with them. The invitation is practical and personal. Walk, learn, and be shaped. If your heart stirs with curiosity or with a quiet recognition that the way might be for you, take a moment now. Pause, breathe, and speak simply. Express a desire to follow. Ask for help to start living differently, or invite the Spirit to make your life a witness. If you would like to explore this path more deeply, there are resources and communities ready to walk with you, places to study the teachings, to join in prayer, and to practice mercy together. Final psalmic prayer. Maker of the way, you who called the lost and breathed life into the fearful, we come with longing and with questions. Shape us into people who bear your mercy, who walk the narrow path with courage, and who point others to the one who is the truth. Send your Spirit to renew our hearts, steady our feet, and make our lives a lamp for those who wander in darkness. If this journey has touched you, consider taking the next step. Join a study, seek a community, or simply pray the words you know and ask the Lord to lead you. Discover the path with Jesus. The road to truth is walked with him, and it leads to life.